Hello, and welcome to the Weird Waves podcast. My name is Taylor, and this is episode 56. On this week's podcast, we are talking to Ben Wei. He is a surfboard shaper and surfing commentator based in Tokyo, Japan. This is a fascinating episode. Ben talks in such detail about his super interesting life. It is just absolutely wild. Some of the shapes that he has created, along with the really unique art that he's made out of foam, you will recognize. It is just insane. And just keep an eye out for the facial expressions I make when he's telling me these stories. They're totally unreal. I really know and I hope that you guys will enjoy this week's episode. Hey, sweet. How are you? Good morning. Well, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Actually, no, is it morning for you guys?
Yeah, it's 8:15 or about almost. Yeah.
Right
So
on. Well,
on Thursday.
thanks for waiting for me.
Yeah, I'm an early riser. I'm up at 6 always, so that kind of made the time difference not so. We just had to go opposite of each other.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so everything's all good. Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too. So, welcome to the podcast. Is this your first
Yeah.
podcast or have you done one before?
I've done not necessarily like a video kind of interview thing for my buddy's channel in Spain,
Oh,
and I
cool.
think it's like an Instagram TV kind of thing. But yeah, as far as like podcast stuff, yeah, this is the first one. So yeah, thanks.
That's cool. That's cool. So, how did you maybe talk about your origin story? Are you originally you're living in Tokyo now? Are you from there natively, or how did you end
No,
up there?
I'm from North County, San Diego, from Oceanside, and I came to Japan on a skateboarding tour. I was sponsored by a company called Gravity Skateboards, which is a longboard skateboard company out of San Diego. And in the mid to late 90s, they had like a really big popularity here in Japan. And I was their very first pro rider. So they sent me and the owner of the company to Japan
Wow.
when I was 17, and we did demos and showed up at trade shows and things like that. And we were also like filming video during that trip. But I was here for a week and a half and had a blast. And of course, like everything was taken care of. I didn't have to pay for anything, so that was even easier. But
Right.
when I was on my way back, I was telling the owner of the company, I was like, fucking Japan's pretty cool, and I think that like I could totally dig living there. And I'd actually studied some Japanese because I grew up working in a surf shop in Oceanside. Uh,
Hmm.
Now it's called Surf Ride. They sponsor a lot of pro surfers and stuff. Back then it was called Hobie Oceanside, and it was like the biggest board dealer of all of San Diego County, and like 300 brand new boards of all the top brands in stock. And so I had a handful of customers from Japan that would come over, pick out snowboard gear, surfboards, everything, and they only wanted to deal with me. I don't know if it was just because I was the Asian kid in the place or what, but I was like, people would come in, they'd spend like $10,000 at once. They'd be like, I want all of these Donald Takayama longboards, or I want these Channel Island surfboards, and everything was just nuts. It was when like the economy was just booming. And so since I had all of these really good customers that would come and visit me all the time, I went ahead and I took beginning Japanese in a community college called Miracosta in San Diego. And I was the youngest person in the class. I ended up kind of acing the class. And right after I'd finished that class was my trip to Japan. So like I got right into using it right away, and I was like, you know what? I think I could pull off like coming over here and really doing it. And so that was when I was 17, and I started shaping surfboards around 18, 19, and I started selling my boards to Japan when I was around 22. And so from there on, I had some friends distributing my surfboards to Japan from California. and they would send me over for the yearly trade show. There's a huge trade show in wintertime here called Interstyle.
Hmm.
And yeah, they'd buy me a ticket to come over here and just show off my boards and mingle with everybody. And after a little bit, I was like speaking the language. I had a ton of connections, and they were making a huge amount of money off of my sales, where I was just getting paid as though I was making boards for someone in San Diego. And so,
Uh,
as soon as I caught on to it, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna just freaking go over there and start doing it myself. And I found the means and connections and places to stay and make boards. And yeah, I've been here for 10 years now, and it's pretty darn cool.
yeah, that's epic. What was the process like, immigration wise? Was it pretty like easy because you had already had an established business, so you could transfer that there, or how does that work?
No, I started about 2 years after living here. I started doing the commentary for the WSL here in Japan.
Mm,
And so like I had like sponsorship visa before my company was established here.
hmm.
So yeah, I just came over here and I was working the first. I mean, I stayed over here for like the 6 months that you're allowed as a tourist,
Yeah.
and then I'd split over to Hong Kong for like a day or two, and then I'd come back.
Yeah.
I did that 3 times, and then like the third time they were like, "Whoa, buddy, like you can't just like walk away for a weekend and come back and get another 6 months." So
Yeah, yeah.
after that, I had to get like the official sponsorship. And now I've got like my own, I've got business partners here and I've got my own company established here.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a cool setup. And I still got my American passport, which is great. So
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's always interesting to hear the different ways that people go about living in different countries. I know that the systems vary so much, so I always like to ask that question.
yeah.
So your boards are super unique, very different, and I'm really interested in, is that how they started that way? What has your evolution kind of been in board shaping, and also what is it your clientele kind of from the beginning was Japanese oriented, so did you kind of shift your board shaping that way when you moved there, or like what was that process like?
Yeah, well, like the whole shaping thing came from having that job at the surf shop when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And like I did homeschool through like junior high, high school to where I got a job at this shop when I wasn't even legal to work. I was like I was working there illegally at 13. And by the time I turned 15, I was the top board salesman of the shop. And almost kind of like I managed the skateboard department, ordered all the body boards for the shop, and then I was like on the floor and I was just like a complete madman in a candy store because it was like I was 13, totally like freaking on surfing, living a block from the beach. And here I am, and I've got access to all of the best boards and best brands in the whole world. And I can basically have anything in the shop because the all the brands they'll give you like a super cut on the wholesale price for the
Hmm.
salespeople. Because if you like their stuff, you're going to push it and you're going to end up selling their stuff. I mean, like, you're not going to, for the most part, you're going to recommend what you're using yourself to the customers. And so that was the deal. And it was like, everyone was like, "Hey, Ben, you should try our boards." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, give me one. I'll take it." And like, I was buying them so cheap that I could ride them twice and turn it back into the shop as a trade in and get exactly the same amount of money as I got as I so like I didn't have to pay for board like the initial board I had to pay for, and then after doing trade-ins I literally went through, I think it was 6 years in that shop, and I went through probably over 300 boards. Like
Wow.
there were some that I would like really like and I'd hold on to for a while, and there was other ones that I'd ride for 2 sessions and I'd be like, "No, this thing sucks," and I'm trading it back in. But like that was my whole, instead of going to high school, like my school was boards. And so like I
That's so
really,
crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. And it was like the coolest opportunity ever because I was super attracted to the weird stuff. And so like while I rode what was out there and what was the mainstream, like top models from Channel Islands, John Carper, Rusty, Timmy Patterson, like all the best. And there was ones that I really liked, and then there was other ones that I completely hated. And it was, I'm like, Oceanside's got waves all the time. You can surf every day, basically.
Mhm.
Like even like where like Joel Tudor and Rob Machado were from down in Cardiff and down there, there's great waves, but when it goes flat, everyone comes to Oceanside because they can surf. And so like I never had to go more than a couple days without being able to surf. And so I was trying new boards all the time, trading them in, and not trying to just stick to like my same size and dimensions. I did that throughout like a bunch of different brands, but as soon as like a new gimmick or like a new type of board would come out, I'd be the first one on it. I'd be like, "Give me that thing! Like, why does this thing have five fins? Like, what is this? Like, I was so attracted to the weirdness, but at the same time, the bosses of my shop, they were twin brothers, super super cool dudes, and they were longboarders, and so they would take me under their wing, and like I'd go longboarding with the bosses, and then all my friends were shortboarders, and they hated longboards, and they'd be like, "Bring the freaking longboard with us." So I'd go shortboard with my friends, I'd go longboard with the bosses, and this is right at the cusp of when Joel Tudor brought back modern longboarding. Like it was a dad sport basically until that. And I grew up skateboarding with Joel. Joel's I think 1 year older than me, and we skateboarded and snowboarded together way more than we surfed together. But he had at that time before I'd even met him, it was like he had made longboarding attractive to young people, which was something that never happened. And all of a sudden, it was like young people kind of wanted to start longboarding, and the dads were stoked because it's like, "Well, dude, my son's into longboarding now. I can go surf." Crazy stuff like that. And so Donald Takayama from Hawaiian Pro Designs, his factory has always been in Oceanside, which he passed away a number of years ago. Amazing guy, amazing shaper and surfer. But I ended up becoming a shop rider through him for Donald Takayama for longboards. So the shortboards was free reign of whatever I wanted, but longboards I just rode Donald's longboards. And Oceanside has a really famous like ongoing Oceanside longboard club contest. And so I did a bunch of those longboard contests while shortboarding with my friends and everything else. But like I had no prejudice of any board sport. I even had a sponsor for standing up on bodyboards. And the funny thing about that is like that's a huge element of what drew me into shaping because I was getting free, like larger than normal size bodyboards. And I was taking epoxy resin and putting fins and stuff in the boards to make them better for stand up surfing. But the raddest thing about them was like, I grew up skateboarding from when I was like 4. And so the nose on a board always felt just like, why do I even have this here? It's like in the way. And I only want the board around my feet, which is like the way you're used to it in skateboarding. And so you've got no weight to pull around with your front foot, nothing like that. And the cool thing about the bodyboards was like, boom, it's exactly like having my skateboard out in the water. And they're fat and they're thick, and they would make speed on like no wave that like a short board I would be like killing myself to try and paddle into. I'd be able to get into it and like plane across a wave that's not even breaking. And as soon as I started putting fins in them, I was like, holy shit, this is so rad. Like there was crazy places I could go on the wave, super compact, super lightweight. And the only problem was like I didn't have the setting the fins in system super perfect. So like I'd ride them 2 or 3 times and the fins would be like broken out. And then I'd just grab another new one. Like I was getting them for free, so it didn't really matter. But what I learned from those was on a bodyboard, it's pretty much the same thickness all the way throughout. On a surfboard, you start, the nose is thin, and there's a thick point of the board, and then it tapers out to usually a pretty thin tail compared to the center thickness. And with those things, by having the same thickness throughout the board, it kept the nose pointed down. You wouldn't be sagging in the water at all. That with the width of the board, you would get so much speed the second you stood up, which didn't happen on a normal shortboard. Like on a normal shortboard, you stand up, you got to get a little bit of a rhythm going before you can really get it moving. And with the stand-up bodyboard thing, there was none of that. It was like off the bottom and just start into maneuvers. And so after a while, it was like I had like various shortboard shapers that I could custom order stuff from, and I kept trying to get them weirder and weirder. And I'd be like, "Hey, I've got this idea, and I'm doing stand-up on bodyboards. Like, what do you think about making something super tiny and thick and everything?" And they're like, "It's kind of crazy." And then a couple people that I ordered them from, like, I put in my order and I thought we had communication perfect. And then they gave me pretty much the same thing that they made me every time. And I was like, "You guys are freaking idiots. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm trying to push the envelope here, and you guys are just keeping me on the same junk." And so after that, I took what I learned from the bodyboards, what I learned from riding longboards, eggs. There weren't that many fishes at that time. Like it was more like what they call mid-length now. That term didn't even exist back then. Like Donald Takayama had a longboard, and then he had what was, if it was under 7'6" to like over 6.5 feet, it was called an egg. And like he had a little logo of an egg with a chicken popping out of it. Even that was like what Joel Tudor used as a shortboard if he wasn't longboarding. And so that was your option. You had like over 6 kind of roundish board for really small waves, which is more for like longboarders to use as a shortboard. And then you had shortboards, and that was basically it. There was like very huge gap between all of these things. So all of a sudden I'm like, all right, I want that thickness, and I want that flat width and speed of my bodyboards. And then all of these different things that it like pretty much going and hand picking like a few things from every board that I've ever tried. And I was like, I'm going to mix this into something like that's never been done, but I know already without even having to try it that all of these parts work because I've felt it. And so I started getting to go into that bodyboard factory, and they would let me have free reign of all the materials, all the tools, everything else. And so the first shaping that I ever did was out of bodyboard foam. And now what everyone's riding, these like catch surf and all these little mini.
Yeah.
I did that when I was 17. And like I did, I moved out of the bodyboard shape and made what looked like almost like a mini cartoon surfboard back then, like 4'2" to like 4'6", super thick, with more of a surfboard outline than a normal boogie board. And the problem with boogie boards is the tail is so fat that like for going backside or doing a cutback, your back foot has to move from one rail to the other, which is super weird if you're a surfer. Like you have this oblong, like diagonal stance to control the parts of the board. So it's not really like perfectly adaptable to surfing. So I was like, I need to get rid of that width in the tail, pull the tail in more to where I can keep my foot in the center of the board on a traction pad and have the same roll front side and back side. So I put all of this crazy stuff together, started making them out of bodyboard foam. And where are you from, Taylor?
I'm from, well, now we surf in Florida. So we just moved to Florida. But mostly surfing in like mushy, small shore break here for the most
Yeah.
part.
Do you guys have black ball at your beaches, like where it's only swimming and soft boards?
No.
Okay, well it's like it's all over California.
Okay.
And so they have a full like no hardboard rule. And this has been
Okay.
going on forever. And
Like for
so
safety.
for safety by the lifeguards.
Okay.
But like beyond safety, it was just a pain in the ass at the moment. Like
Yeah.
there would be no swimmers or anybody anywhere, but we would not be able to surf from after like 9 a.m. to like 3 in the afternoon. And so you'd see perfect waves, nobody there, nobody even swimming to get hurt, but we couldn't get in the water and we were freaking. And so at that time, I was living in Del Mar, which is still in North County, San Diego, but it's a little bit farther south. And that has like the longest stretch of beach that has black ball. So like there's 4 or 5 super sweet spots that you cannot surf all day long. And so I got my hands on like the rules from the lifeguards kind of rule book on what are the limits and what's the do's and what's the goes and can't go thing in the black ball. And so the boards that I was making just for fun, they happened to fit within the black ball limits. And so I had a soft board, which was, it had to be soft. That was part of the rule. And it had to be under 5 feet long. And I had already been making them about 4'6". Like that was my preferred length already. And so all of a sudden, like me and a group of about 5 or 6 friends were the only people that could surf this entire beach all day. And it was like I had people coming over begging me for the board so they could go and surf. And I never even made them to sell. I don't think I don't think I sold a single one. I made about 20 of them. And all these people in North County, San Diego, I called it barely legal blackball boards
Oh
because
my gosh.
it was like, at the time I was like a crazy kid and that was the name of a porn mag too. And it was just like, it's crazy. I was like, but like, you're such a freak, like whatever. But it was barely legal by the lifeguard standards. And they would like see us out there and send like dinghy boats and come up and check out the boards and they'd have to shut the hell up and leave. And it was rad. It was the raddest thing ever. And so that's where I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. Like I've got the shapes and the dimensions, like super simple science, like low rockers, a lot of flotation, way wider than a normal shortboard with real big boxy rails. And then the fin setup was like a looser fin setup. So like basically if you have any board that's like a regular competition performance shortboard,
Hmm.
the distance from the tail to the fins, or well, the distance to the center fin and the distance from the center fin to the side fins is so minute between every brand across the board. And it's like, that's why pro surfers have a board from DHD and then they've got a Channel Islands. It's like, it's so close across the board that everyone basically is dealing with virtually the same
It's like standardized.
standardized like fin positions.
Okay.
But if I put the standardized fin position, which is pretty meant for riding towards the back of the board with your back foot, as far as controlling and making speed, my boards were too wide and too thick, and you'd be fighting that fin position on the turns and the maneuvers.
Hmm.
I moved the fins forward, pushed the center fin more together. And I don't know if you've ridden a skateboard, but when you loosen up the trucks on a skateboard, all of a sudden the curve of the turn is so much tighter.
Yeah.
And that was basically it. It was like loosening up the trucks, and I moved the center fin up like quite a ways up from a normal shortboard. Side fins were also up farther up. So like you're even if your feet were more centered over the front of the tail, like the more in front of the deck pad, you could still do full turns. And all that thickness and width wouldn't get in the way. And the other rad thing was like, because it was so responsive and maneuverable, we were able to start doing like skate tricks, like pop shove-its and weird stuff that you could never shove your 6-foot board. Like at that time, short boards were like 5, 10, 6 foot. And all of a sudden it was like, I've got a skateboard, a short board, something that works in blackball. It was nuts. And so after a good amount of years of that, I was like, it's time to move to real foam and real glass jobs because I've got the shapes. And if I can get like even gnarlier details as far as the edges on the boards, solid fin setups, concaves, things like that, I'm like, these boards could be like unstoppable. So all of a sudden I was like, forget the boogie board foam. Like I'm ready to move into normal foam and glass. And at the time, there's a company called INT, and they're still around. It's not the original owners, but for making softboards. And they were from Oceanside. They started making sandals. It was a sandal company, and all of a sudden they got into making softboards out of nowhere. And the owner, the director of the company, was kind of like one of my elders from Oceanside, who'd seen my blackball boards forever, and out of nowhere was just like, yeah, we're just gonna start doing Ben's design, like do my designs without giving me any percentage of the profits or anything. And they just moved into like, oh yeah, we're gonna make so they called their board the beater and didn't use the blackball term.
Are you serious? They still have that board, right?
No way, you got that.
No, doesn't Catch Surf make a beater? They have a beater model.
Now, INT like did years of promotion and marketing. They even got Rob Machado on them and stuff. And then
no way.
And they sold out to Catch Surf.
Okay.
And so that's how Catch Surf somehow turned this whole, like, just blew up overnight. I don't know. They had money to deal with it. And so they acquired that. And then the beater all stemmed through this whole crazy long cycle of shit. And now everyone and their sister has one. And I've like, no one has.
And that's your board.
Yeah. I mean, like, I have videos of the Hawaiian legend Buttons, Kaluyo Kalani, back in the day, the Afro dude that rode switch dance and stuff. And a lot of dudes from San Diego 25 years ago riding what's basically a lot of these guys now have. Like it's nuts. And
that is so wild. So do you think it was because of your age that they were just like, oh, we're just gonna start making this model? Like, or
yeah, they were like, dude, Ben's just like some crazy freaking kid that's like doesn't really realize the potential of business of this. And I didn't. And like I didn't go into it to make it a business in the first place. It was like, we got boards that we can go surf on, and we don't give a shit. Like we actually don't want more people to have these, because then like there'll be a bunch more people out surfing when we would have a private beach to ourselves, basically.
Right.
And I don't know if do you know Chris Cote from the WSL? The guy, the speaker from the.
It sounds really familiar, I'm sure.
So he's from he's from 10 minutes away from me, but his older brother acquired one of those, and they had one at their house for like, I think 2 or 3 years. It was one of my better ones that I had. And like everybody was using them around Encinitas where they lived. And yeah, so it's like in North County, San Diego, there's no secret. Everybody remembers those boards. And I just recently got the original promotion video back from my buddy who edited it, who had it on beta cassette. And he had to like, it took like 3 years to find a place that could change a beta cassette, which is the bigger than VHS ones, to digital form. But yeah, it's like, that was my shaping history right there. But
that is so wild.
It's pretty crazy, but it makes me happy at the same time, because it's like people are writing what we were having fun on 20 something years ago, and now it's like somehow through years and years it's feeding to people's fun now, which is rad. I just would have loved to have a little part of it. Right. Like whatever.
So that's That's just so wild. But so do the people at Catch Surf know that? Like, do they know that story, or not that they're responsible for it, but I just wonder if they like it's a pretty interesting story.
They're not they're for sure not responsible. I mean, like they
Yeah,
they
yeah.
it changed hands probably a couple times before it even went to Catch Surf, I think. I don't really know
Yeah.
the behind the, but they probably don't know. But I was thinking recently, I was like, it would be so rad, like if I could get them to do like a retro, barely legal
Yeah.
model through Catch Surf or something. So I still got
I
shape. I got shapes that work
yeah.
so well in that foam that even they're not doing. And I'm like, I've just got data banks of all this weird junk that I've made forever. And like, it's, I could redraw every design that I've ever made from when I was 17. Like, it was made that much of an impact, the stuff that really sucked, because I had a billion failures. But the cool thing was like I got all the materials for free, so I could experiment out my neck. It was like if you wanted to be a chef and come up with some new like crazy recipes and you grew all the stuff yourself, you're like, screw it. Like I didn't have to pay for it. And if it sucks, like throw it out. But I learned something. And that was basically the approach. But after that, like this is still like I'm dragging this out forever, but
No,
um
this is insane. This story is like it's amazing.
it's pretty funny. But like after that, I was like so set on, well, I'm done with that phase. Like I'm taking these designs to a real board now, and this is gonna be the thing. Like I was like, that was rad, but I'm like, I'm gonna go do something so much better than that. It was my whole headspace. So when the INT guys did that, like I guess they even recently had some podcast thing, and the guy's name is Louis Hayward. I'm really good friends with all of like them. They were the people I looked up to when I was surfing when I was a kid. But they just kind of like took candy from a baby. It was like Ben doesn't really. I don't think they thought I cared that much, so it's not a huge thing. But I guess he mentioned that they got the idea from me on a podcast recently. Someone said, and so I was like, "Well, I'm happy with that. You know, it's not forgotten, whatever." But as soon as I started shaping real foam, which is even more of a funny story, because like I had so many people. Gary Linden was the person that shaped my first board when I was 12. His factory was like 2 blocks from my house, and he would see these crazy soft boards that I made and stuff in my garage, and he'd be like trying to give me tips, like he's the nicest guy, most coolest, and he's like, and he's got tons of experience with how the surfboard business works, and he'd be like, "Oh Ben," he speaks really soft. "Oh Ben, like it'd be better if you kind of cleaned up and sanded it around the fins, and make it a little more presentable." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't care as long as it works." Just like a dumb kid. Like there was people that would have given me the advice or even taught me how to shape, and I was just a dumb punk kid that was like I respected them, and I wasn't like a a punk in that way, but just kind of like I'm not gonna have anyone tell me how I'm gonna do stuff because I want to do it my way, and I don't want to do anything the way that the previous generations did. And that was my whole thing was like I'm gonna learn how to do it myself. I don't care if I screw up. Like I know what I need to make. I already had the finished product in my brain. It was like all I have to do is learn how to use the tools. It's not discovering what I'm gonna make. It's just how I'm gonna get there. And so at the time, my mom lived in Cabo San Lucas, which is a super super nice surf spot on the peninsula down in Baja California, which is below California. And all winter long it's like it's below Hawaii, so it's warmer than Hawaii in the winter. So I would go every winter to my mom's house in Cabo, and it's basically all rights and mostly reefs. There's a lot of beach break, shore break stuff, but there's some really amazing like world class reefs when it's on. And so that was a 5 minutes walk from my mom's house. And so when I went down there to spend a whole winter, one of the trips, I took all the materials, um, blanks, fin boxes at the old time as the old FCSs, everything I was going to need to build 2 boards. I took down for the winter, and I was like so reluctant because it was the first time I've actually had to pay money for materials, and I was like, dude, if I screw this up, this is really like I gotta be like I gotta attack this like I'm really gonna do it, or I'm not even gonna touch them. So I went for like 2 months without even touching the materials and looking at the blanks every day, and I was like, all right, I just got to get into one of them, and if I screw it up, I've still got another one. So in my mom's, like, they have these like palm tree leaf palapa huts, like patios in Mexico. And so my mom had a huge patio with a palapa hut, literally like 40 seconds walk to the beach. And I attacked the blank with hand tools with a Sureform, like not the way you make a board anymore, but
Yeah.
I with no lights, no racks, on a table, on my mom's table, and I just freaking just started going, and I was like, we're gonna see how this goes, and then if I'm not feeling it, I'm just gonna quit. But like, I ended up getting more and more momentum, and I'm like, dude, it's coming along. Like, I just got to finish this thing already. And so I finished my first shape in one day, and using curves from another existing board that I had. I didn't have templates, nothing, and like the most simple of tools ever. And you can buy boat resin at the paint stores in Mexico, and it's super cheap. It comes in like literally recycled milk bottles, and you could buy enough resin to glass a whole board for like $4, which would be pretty expensive if you actually bought the real stuff, like the stuff that's made for boards. And so it's this brown colored resin, like it starts purple and it turns brown as it gets. And without knowing, never doing any glassing or anything, like I'd worked with bodyboard materials before that, so it's a whole different process. And so I just attacked it like barefoot. I had no acetone to clean off the resin from my hands. And like I had resin literally dripping on my toes. And I'd go down, they've got really coarse sand like Hawaii, like shell sand. And this is like the worst echo story ever, but like I would go down to the shoreline and like literally like scrub the resin off between phases. And so within basically one day, I had my first shape done and already laminated and ready to put the fins in. And then I put the fins in using like a Dremel tool, like not even using a router and everything. But um, I was such a weird like surfboard nerd that I knew the dimensions. I knew like the technical parts of like how much you angle the fins and that kind of weird stuff. And I already had like certain formulas that worked from the soft boards. And so I was like, okay, I'll just follow the same thing, throw it in, everything else. Spray painted a logo on it with a stencil. And the next day I had it down at the local point, which is called Zippers. It's where they have the women's WQS contest now in Cabo. It's a really amazing, perfect right on a reef. And so that was 5 minutes walk down the beach. And I was like, okay, like if it sucks, I can always like take the fins out. I can change stuff. I can put edges or take edge away, like whatever I got to do. And so I took that board the first time down to the beach, showed all my buddies, all the locals. I'm like, yeah, check out what I made. Like this is my first actual shape to these older guys who really knew. And like looks pretty good. And I went to go like as simple, like surefire. I went like a almost an 80s, late 80s style shortboard. So like didn't try to go super high performance. I knew that like if it was wide, it had thickness and like a mellow rocker, it's pretty much sure to go no matter what. And so I'm like, I want to get the confidence from making a decent shape that works, and then I
Yeah.
can move it getting crazier. And so I took it down to the beach. First couple waves, like that was the one thing I learned when I was a kid, when all the trade-in boards that I had, it was like if there's waves, like semi-rideable waves, like even like knee waist high, you get on a board and like you get basically two waves. If it feels wrong, it's probably going to be wrong even like 2 weeks later. Like, it depends how much experience you have with different boards, but like if you're right, if you're getting on something similar to what you've ridden before and it doesn't feel right, then just get rid of it. Like, it's like, don't even waste your time, because you're going to end up backtracking and having to like make up time to get back to your same level. So I'm like, first wave, I'm like, wow, it feels good. The turns don't feel weird. I'm like, it's making speed. Second wave, I'm like, I'm stoked. This thing feels pretty sick. I actually think my first board is working. So instead of like staying out there for 40 minutes, I took like 3 waves and came in, and I was like, I want to see someone else ride it. And so like I started like telling my buddies, I'm like, hey, try this out, try this out, try this out. And it's a right point, and I'm regular foot. And I was like, all right, I want to see it surf backside. So I'm going to give it to my goofy footer friend. And this is like different ages, different sizes of riders, but basically everyone got out and they're like, yeah, it feels good. And I was like, sick. I'm like, right on. And I know how I did it. So I've got one more blank to go even sicker, like to go even more crazy now. And so starting with the second blank, I went back to making a shape really close to what I was making out of the boogie board foam. And so I went super short. I didn't go as short as I did with the bodyboard foam. I went to like 5.0, which was quite short at the time. This is like when Lost had the video 5.5 with the guys riding the fishes. I don't know if you remember that. It's like a classic fish video when they first came out with the twin fin fish that they now call like the Redux or all sorts of stuff. That was huge. Everyone was like, 5'5", that's so short. And I was like, forget that. I'm like, I've been riding way shorter shit than that. So I'm going to like, I made it 5.0, stuck with the same, like, the tail was basically like, after shaping the deck and the bottom of the board, I basically left the tail the way it was just by cutting it with a jigsaw and not toning down any of, like, not sharpening it down, keeping it blocky. And it was basically, it looked just like a tail of my earlier Barely Legal boards. So I was like, all right, same fin position as I used before. I know that works. And that freaking board, like, it took from where those first sponge boards, like the best feeling that I got on those, and it was like tenfold. It was like I could do anything, and my surfing, like, literally in one session, I was doing things that I'd never done after surfing for like over 18 years. The first session, like doing airs and grabs on like a knee-high wave. And I was like, oh my God, I have the most freaking magic board ever. And I basically rode it almost into the ground. Like I'd used nothing but that board from like knee-high to well overhead. And my buddy, who was the manager of my surf shop, he grew up as like my big brother, basically. He came down to Cabo with his family. I hadn't seen him in like, I think 4 years or something. He's like, dude, I'm going to Cabo. Are you still there? I'm like, dude, cruise down. Like, I'm right by Zippers. Like, it's on. I've got these crazy boards that I made. You don't even have to bring boards, I told him. And he had brought boards. But as soon as I got him on him, he was like, whoa, these are gnarly. He's like, you need to bring these back to Oceanside and you need to like get this going. And so he was like my push to where he was basically like the person who kind of got me into being weird with surfboards. Like when I was a kid, it's like we were cutting fins out and putting fin boxes and stuff. And like, he was like feeding to my fire of like getting freaky with board design. And, so when he said, like, this thing feels sick, like, you need to bring it back and make a business out of it, and I was like, dude, like, I'm going, like, for sure. And so I went back and finally shaped the board in my buddy's garage, tried to make it way cleaner than the first one. And then it was the first board that I'd handed over to my buddy's glass shop to do an actual, like, professional glass job. I still didn't even have logos for the boards or anything. Like everything was done by pen and like spray paint. But it was an actual nice, presentable glass job with good sanding and everything else. And like the fins were put in nicely and had edges and everything else. And from that, I got in a magazine that was run out of Newport Beach called Water Magazine. And I think I just turned 20, 19 or 20. And like I'd come up with the name 50/50 Wave Skates was.
Ooh.
And my whole thing, like I told you about my buddy Chris Cote, he was working at Trans World Surf Magazine, which was our local magazine. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to start a whole board company with boards that are only made for airs, is what I told him at that time. I was like, I don't care if it can do a cutback. Like, it's not for a contest, but I'm going to make boards that are just going to like be able to blast airs on every wave. And
So a
like,
surf skate.
Yeah.
So you can ride a wave like skateboarding base essentially.
Yeah. And so like I came up with a really stupid name, and my buddy's a writer and editor for the magazine, like different buddy. I'm like, yeah, because they're like Oceanside is basically like the Venice Beach of San Diego. Like it's not where the rich kids live. Like everyone comes from broken homes, and it's like your buddies, you've probably got 2 or 3 buddies whose families are gangsters, and like it's like back then it was like a deep surf town. And then you would move 10 minutes down the road to Carlsbad, and it was like people with nice homes and nice families. And then you move down a little farther, and it just got like nicer and nicer. And it was like, we're from the freaking ghetto, basically, of San Diego, as far as the surf culture is concerned. And so I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to call them Ghetto Tech Wave Skates. And he was like, dude, he's like, that's pretty rad, but he's like, I think it doesn't show enough value or something. And so he helped me come up with 50/50 because I was going half surf and half skate was my whole deal. And so from there, we decided 50/50 Wave Skates. Like not even a month later, I got a little write-up in Trans World Surf Magazine about these boards that are just made for popping tricks, and nobody care, like not caring about doing cutbacks or looking pretty. And it's like just like an new edgy project kind of thing. And so from there, Oceanside's like they're the youngest super ripper, like amazing talents. This guy Zach Reinhardt and Derek Balkelman were 2 like real best buddies, but they were the gnarliest aerialists for Oceanside. Like people, even like Christian Fletcher. I talked to Ozzy Wright once, and he was like, "Oh, Zach Reinhardt for sure. I know that guy." Like they invented tricks that became full mainstream, like crazy stuff on my boards. And so they were my first riders. And from there, all of a sudden, people were like, what are these things? But it didn't spread outside of Oceanside that much. Like anyone who came to Oceanside saw them. Anyone who lived in Oceanside for sure knew what they were. And then as I started actually getting orders and making them for customers, I'd have the boards sitting in the racks at all these different glass shops. And Oceanside is like the industry mecca. Like Huntington Beach is the style and the fashion and surf culture, but where all the boards are made, like especially now, is in Oceanside. So all my boards were sitting in the valley where all these factories are, and people started like tripping out. Like they go in to drop out for their own shapes, and they were like, the hell is this crazy thing? And I started making programs. At that time, we were just starting to use computer machines. And so I just started. I wasn't such a good shaper, but I had great designs that worked that I'd made by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, this board's freaking magic. I'm just going to have the computer recreate it. And so I would make programs so that I could recreate the same shape for a bunch of people. Because like with my own hand shaping skills, they would probably come out pretty different every time. And
Right. So to get more consistency.
Yeah, and I like basically skipped trying to have to be a good shaper. And I'm like, I've got these boards that are mental, and I'm like, I don't need to wait and learn for years how to like use a planer well. I'm like, I just like people need to get on these boards, is what I was thinking. So um shortly after that, like things started morphing into like the sizes and the like the widths and the thicknesses that I was doing from like a while back. And it was like, because nothing is hidden in the factory, because you've got a board that's sitting there being waiting to be glassed for 2 weeks while 50 shapers are in and out of the factory, like dropping their boards off in the very next rack, and they're like, whoa, what's this? I think I'm going to make something like this, you know? And so I don't know if that was definitely the reason, but like right after that, like Channel Islands came out with the Biscuit, which was this really round, thick board that was under 6 feet, which it wasn't exactly the same shape as mine, but it was starting to lead along the same concept of having a low rocker and a thick tail and all this stuff. And the computer operator, there was only one operator that could scan your board at that time, and his name was Tyler. And he goes, I brought in a brand new boards. I had like, I think it was my fifth program I brought in to have him scan. And he goes, dude, Ben, you should probably take a look at this. He goes, Rob brought in this board that looks pretty similar to what you're making. And he was talking about Machado, and Machado helped develop the Biscuit. And I'm not blaming any, like I've surfed with Rob at his home spot of Seaside plenty of times and stuff. But I'm like, I'm wondering, like, if it's from sessions where we surf together, or the waves are almost not rideable, or it's from the things sitting in the factory or whatever. But he was like, I'm the one programming it, and I can tell by all of the calculations that it's like pretty close to what you've been doing for, because I had my programs with him for 3 years before that. And so all of a sudden, like these things really started changing. But that was like the big thing where I was like, whoa, dude, like if Channel Islands is starting to make something that like that I've come up with, I'm like, first off, I'm super pleased, because like
It's something that
that's
people are trying to emulate.
for sure. But that's also like, if like some of the people that you respect the most start borrowing from your ideas, that like that pretty much affirms everything that you've been doing. So I'm like, damn, like that's pretty rad. But then it ended up being like a freaking top seller. The Biscuit sold millions, and then they did like a surf tech version of it. And so it's like I've always just been trying to keep moving on to the next. And I've been so horrible with marketing what I've got, like, because I should have been, I should be satisfied like way before I am, because it's thinking of the general public, they'd probably be super stoked with it, even though I'm like, I can get a little bit better. And that's basically like, I've been going with that for like 27 years now. And now now I've almost hit the point where I'm like, I think that there's certain models that can't get any better, because like I'll still be making them for myself, or I'll still be like having people that have a board from 10 years ago, and they're like, how do we get your boards in California? I'm still writing this yellow freaking, they'll send me pictures of these boards that they're still using. And they're like, I tried to have other shapers kind of like, sorry, but I couldn't get my hands on your board. I've tried to have like different shapers make something like it, but it just didn't work the same. And so I'm like, I had completely marketable and saleable ideas 10 years ago that are still pretty much valid now that everything's almost morphing and kind of changing in that direction. And
Mm-hmm.
so my main thing now is I'm just going back to all of the things that I know that I was as satisfied as I can get with the design of. And I've still got like all the programs, all the designs, all the data of like where the fins were, and technical stuff of where the edges on the board were, things like that. So like now, instead of moving forward, I'm actually starting to move backward. And I'm like, I'm going back to all these things that worked, and I should have just taken ahead and just made a business and tried to sell instead of just constantly trying to move forward. And so now I'm kind of starting to do that, and like I'll ride the things that I'll ride boards that I haven't ridden, like models that I haven't ridden in 5 years that I've remade, and I'm like, this thing's still so damn good. Or I don't know if my levels change or my what's changed, but it's like, why the hell wasn't I satisfied with it then? And everybody else seemed to have been super stoked with it. And so I'm like, I'm not creating any more new models. Like I'm going back and I'm going to offer like my original models that are now like refined because my shaping skills have gotten better over
Mm-hmm.
that span. But like the end product is still like basically my my instinct and like what I feel is right has not changed and definitely not been influenced by what the rest of the market's doing with like moving from one design to the next, and then everyone all makes this and then everyone all makes this, and I'm like, excuse me, I have no interest in whatever is like the top seller of whoever. And I don't care if 1,000 people want this because that's what everybody's making. And right now, twin fins are in or mid lengths
Mm-hmm.
are in. It's like, screw it. Like, there's plenty of those. I don't need to make any of that. Like, there's two handfuls of really good shapes that are available if you want that kind of thing from anyone in the world. And I'm like, that's their deal. Like, let them do it. And congratulations for making a lot of money with it. But I have no interest. And it's like, it, there was a point when Daniel Thompson had all the square nose boards, the Vanguards, and all of a sudden every shaper made a Vanguard, and I'm like, there's no freaking way I'm ever gonna do that, and like I'm never gonna make something that resembles someone else's design. It's like way too much pride and way too much experience with boards to need to grab ideas from other people. And now all of a sudden, all of those boards have disappeared. And it's like there's all these crazy cycling fads. And now we're back to, especially over here in Japan, twin fin fish are back like full style. Like, well, I guess all over the world. But
Yeah, I would say here too, and then definitely the soft top it's having a huge with like the almond boards and catch surf is really changing things, and that's I mean,
it's rad though. Like it's,
yeah, no, it's super rad. Like, I bought a longboard yesterday from a used one from a girl on whatever Facebook Marketplace, and her dad was like, "Yeah, it's just too like she's learning." So they went out and bought essentially like a high performance longboard, thinking that she could just lug it back and forth to the beach every day. And so I was like, "Go get a foamy. Like, just go get an 8 foot catch surf with this money and go have fun." And that's what she did, you know? And I'm like, man, that's because it's you right now with those boards, it's a cool moment for foamies because it's actually okay to be a beginner surfer in a way. Like,
yeah. And I mean, there's so many benefits like with the flotation, being able to like bash them into the car as you throw it in there and
yeah,
not ding it. And in all reality, like the only drawbacks in performance are at times when you should probably not even be riding a foamy or a longboard. Like when you've got actually performance conditions is the only time that it's going to draw you back from what you could really be doing. And at that time you wouldn't even be using that anyways. So but
yeah,
below that, you're going to have just as much fun as you're going to have on that
yeah,
for 80% of the population as you are on like a full-on custom longboard. Or um, it's like unless you're a competitor or like of that level, it's about being able to go and surf every day and like enjoy super shitty conditions and something that's easy to care for, and
yeah.
even better if it's cheap. And it's just like, yeah, like I'm totally all for that. And it's something that like I wasn't about the whole user experience. Like it was about it was about me having fun and riding what I want to ride back in the day. But yeah, now it's like it's made surfing so accessible to everyone. And also I think it keeps people in surfing like throughout like the stages that they would probably quit if they had tried to start on a normal shortboard, or even like a performance longboard's not that easy to catch waves like in really small stuff like on the East Coast where you guys are, even here in Japan, it's been so freaking flat you would never even believe.
Dust here too.
Unbelievable. Like my boards that work in like basically 6-inch California, here it needs to be like a foot. But like it hasn't even been a foot until like today. We finally had waves, had a super fun session with like everything that I've been wanting to ride. I took it all to the beach today and I got like 3 hours of riding everything. And but we've been waiting the whole summer for our first like typhoon swell. And this was not even like a real typhoon swell. This was just like base level waves. Like, yeah, I think you guys probably have it better over there right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm gonna go out and try out my new longboard in a minute. Like, I mean
Correct.
later, because there's gnarly hurricane hitting in the Gulf of Mexico. Not here, but in the Gulf. And we're getting some of that, I don't know, whatever. It brings in when the whole system kind of comes towards us. Um,
Which side are you on?
we're on the East Coast, so I'm not on the Gulf side, but whenever there's any sort of storm system that even kind of starts to move around Florida, it seems I'm still kind of learning it. We just moved here, but it
Hmm.
seems like it affects, I mean, basically for the past 3 weeks, it's been kind of like what you were saying, either totally flat or maybe 1.5 feet, like maybe. But yesterday, today, tomorrow, it's getting up to like 4, 3, 4,
Sweet.
some, yeah. So, but it's the only thing that I can see that's changed is the fact that there's a hurricane that was brewing and is coming in. So that kind of seems to be the theme.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's even if it's on the wrong side, there's still things that like will wrap around.
Exactly. Yeah. So learning all that is, I mean, it's just all new, so it's super rad, but it's really interesting to hear about the boards. I mean, I like boards anyways. I always say I have an episode with, do you know who Robin Lene is? She's a graphic artist. She makes cartoons about surfing. She's in
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, she's mostly she makes like they're chicks, but she'll do like their graphic cartoons. She and I came up with the term board whores. It's people that like boards, like have more than one boards. And so I was super interested to hear all about the um like your evolution story. It's just insane. Like all the different ways you found your niche, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm definitely not the only one. I'm sure, like, I think the more like freaky maniac people, like, they probably never even reach the surface. It's like there's people in garages doing weird stuff, surfing weird beaches that aren't in the mainstream and not aren't concerned with media. And now, like, luckily, like you've got Instagram, you're starting to you're starting to see things that are interesting because of people showing interest in those things. And it's like someone puts some freaky design up and all of a sudden everybody tags their friends and all of a sudden it's just popping up and you would never have seen that ever. Like you wouldn't even know it ever existed for 20 years. And now like these little like crazy things that people are doing, it's like all over the place and they're able to get recognition and maybe even business. Like it's crazy. Like I've like been such a loser that I've like never even really made like a website for my boards or anything. And now um I've got orders coming through Instagram. It's like people I make stuff for body surfing. I make all of my original boards and then I have like a kind of a cross-training skateboard design that I've been doing. That's like the first actual real business that I've got going, and it's going super well. And I just got like a really big distribution company here in Japan that signed up to take that over, and I've got a lot of foreign pros riding them as well. Like I through the ISA, I do a commentary for the ISA like world contests, and we had the World Surfing Games, which is like a determining contest for who's going to be in the Olympics here
Mm-hmm.
and last year. And now all of these surfers that I've known from like 7 years of doing QS contests and things like that, everyone's latched on to either their country or a country that they have roots in to be a part of that team. And so I get I think it was 350 competitors or something, maybe something like that. But I got the list of all of the teams and who's in the teams. So I got to like easily a month before the contest, I got to see who was going to be at this contest. And these are people that I've seen like in the contest in Spain and Portugal, in California, like all over the place. And I'm like, okay, I know someone with Team Sweden. Okay, I know someone with Team Portugal. Oh, there's three buddies with Team Costa Rica. Oh, Mexico's coming. And so I picked out one person that I was a personal friend from each team, which ended up being 20 teams. And
Wow.
I painted their country's flag on my skateboard, like
Uh,
hand painted, like 15 hours a day to prepare for the contest. But I made 20 countries boards with my skateboard design and handed them out at the contest. And it just went like boom, like brush fire. And I didn't have parts for all the boards, but 20 countries got a deck with a hand-painted flag of their country on it. And about 7 of them were being ridden around the contest site. And there's people being like, oh, dude, we saw like so-and-so riding your board the other day or riding your board yesterday. I'm like, did you take video? I'm like, what are you doing? Like, but so all of a sudden I've got this great thing that I just started with that one event. And from that, I've gotten like some really well-known pros here in Japan to get on the program, and I was able to talk with all of the coaches and these people of their like performance training academies and stuff of the certain countries. And everyone is like, this is so much more like real surfing than what's out there as the surf skates that they're calling them, like the wiggly boards. And
mm-hmm.
so, yeah, these coaches and trainers are like, dude, we'll put it in our program. Like, this is something that we think will actually help their performance. And so, yeah, instead of like, I come from like a skateboarding background, and like the whole like wiggling around, like kind of like playing like you're surfing with the surf skate thing is just like, it's illegal in the skate world. And so like,
Okay.
yeah, like your friend, like they're real fun until your friends see you on one. It's like that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so
Okay. Okay.
I'm like, I can't use the term surf skate for them, so I call them performance cruisers, and I just created a whole new genre. So I'm like separating myself from that, and it doesn't use anything mechanical. It uses like kind of a mix of retro parts, like from the 70s, like from the old slalom boards, but with all new settings, new sizes of the decks and things like that. And it's got a cut in the deck on each side to where it makes the board twist torsionally. And so when you do a bottom turn, the board twists and punches out the same way as your fins flex in and out when you're doing a turn. And so it's super like a real surfing experience. Like, it's not the easy side of like pretending you're surfing on the sidewalk, but like for people who can surf, they got on them and it looks like they're surfing. And people who can't surf, they don't ride them very well. But it's like I'm not concerned about those people really.
Right. Yeah.
But
That sounds super interesting.
it's pretty rad. And so now, like with the whole stupid COVID junk, I'm waiting for like another month and a half for my stock to come in. But
Hmm.
I've a lot of back orders with the distribution company and stuff. So like things are going to go pretty well with that. And that's pretty much like in 27 years in the board sports industry, it's like my first actual feeling of like a successful business. And so I'm taking that on and moving it back into my surfboards. And now I'm like, I've grown up now and I'm like, I'm not worried about just going surfing every day and just being like a screw off. And so I'm like, I'm happy to work. And I think it's something that like, it's, it's what I do. It's what I should be doing is what I'm starting to realize. And because I'll do it even if it's not going to make me a penny. But I think that the designs are like viable enough to where they have they definitely have their spot in like the available products in the market. So I'm like, I need to go back and like approach it a little more seriously. I've got the product. It's not like something I have to just go and create. And I have a history and people who've been using them for 20 years. So it's like I within a year, I think I've been doing these skateboards for 6 years now, but in the 2 years that I've really spread them out, I've gotten so many people to write me testimonials that are like well-known people that people will listen to. So I'm like, I'm just going to start collecting testimonials from people who've had my boards. I mean, at my high moments, I was making like 200 boards a year, which for someone who's like just a beach bum basically like that's actually pretty good without making a real business out of something. So I'm like, if I go back, I mean there's a lot of people out there that still remember what their experience is on it or they're still using it. And so I just need to go back and kind of collect from that history and move forward in a new way. So
So when people like discover you or your customers or your clients, how does that work? You don't have a website. You are on, is it mostly through Instagram, or it's like you have to, if you know type of deal? How do you find people?
that's
Or how do
kind of
people
the
find you?
that's kind of what it's been like in the past. It was all word of mouth. And I mean, the times that I was doing the best was when I was in Oceanside. It was like all my riders are there, like doing 360 shove-its on boards and crazy aerials in like sub sub good conditions, like basically everyday junk surf, doing maneuvers that you could never get a performance shortboard to do in that size of wave. So people are like, dude, what are these like magic? Like a lot of guys were like, those things are too easy to do airs on. Like some of the pros would like, would they like try and rat on the riders, and they're like, you guys idiots! Like, why are you gonna make it hard for yourself? But so yeah, that was what drove most of my sales in back in the day, and now it's still like like repeat customers, people who've just like stayed connected through 20 something years of doing it. And I mean like the brand is only probably about 17 years old, which is still pretty long. Like it's older than most of the kids that you see in the water. But yeah, like people either see the stuff and find it unique on like posts that I make for I put pictures of all the stuff I make for my customers and stuff. And it's like some of the things that I don't even own myself. So I'm like I want to at least show an example of what can be made. And so I'll throw stuff up all the time, and that somehow just gets people to kind of contact me directly through Instagram. And
And
then
do you ship from where you're at in Japan? Is that how that works? Or do you have somebody make it based off of your like template design and then send it?
no, right now shipping is so expensive from Japan. It's like $500 to send a board to the States, like just to send it. And so
Jeez.
my overseas business that of stuff that's made here is either the skateboards or like my body surfing stuff because it's small, hand
Okay.
planes, hypos and stuff. And then last year with the ISA World Junior Contest, I went back to Oceanside and visited my own factories, and a bunch of people just found out through my Instagram post. They're like, "Dude, you're in California. Like, can you make me a board?" I'm like, "Hell yeah!" Like, so I was able to punch out, I think, like 20 boards last year when I visited California, and so I think I'm gonna start kind of working it out to where I do like a shaping trip, and I mean, with the price of sending 2 boards, I can buy myself a ticket and I can go see everyone at home. So I'm like, I'm just gonna fly back and go take care of it there, and get people to kind of like show their interest and get pre-orders before I go. But yeah, I have programs and I have people that are like, yeah, we can reproduce your shapes, but then when I tell them all of the after details that you have to put in after the computer shape,
Hmm.
there's so many little things that are put in by hand that you actually have to measure out yourself. It's not just scrubbed off of the computer like most short boards. So I would literally have to train someone how to finish it. And most of these factories are like, you kidding? Like, if you're not doing like 200 boards, you're not going to waste our time and like taking up that much time. Because
Yeah.
like everything now, like if you're getting a performance short board, it is like 80, I would say like close to 80% finished before it even reaches the shaping room. And the guys are like, couple things, dot in the fins, and like I know guys that work for some of the big brands, and they're like, yeah, I've got it down to 10 minutes aboard. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, that's
But
longer
it's
than
not technically a pop out. That's the thing that drives me crazy. Is that they don't it's still classified as like hand shaped, right?
it's hand touched, basically. But I'm like, I swear, like they're making a surfboard faster than you can make pancakes, pretty much. Not everyone. I mean, there's stuff that's
Yeah, yeah.
like before, like Handshape is actually using tools and having also like a small degree of risk of like making a mistake. And
Hmm.
now it's so close tolerance that like they're barely touching it to finish it. And it's like if they do more than like barely touch it, then they're actually changing what the computer did, and then it's becoming something else. So like they have to almost not touch it. That's the crazy thing is like they
Super wild.
scrub out some lines that are left from the computer, but like that's the problem with the industry now is people aren't worried about getting something that's special. Like there's a huge percentage that just want to have what everybody else has, and the way to get hundreds and hundred boards all over the world and have the same model that everyone's using in the magazine or has on their Instagram, that's how it has to be done. So it's just like I was gonna say it's like cars, but cars have a lot more hands-on junk going on in it. It's like a printed T-shirt, you know. It's like someone took so much time to come up with the design of it, and then after that, it's just like, phew, it's done. All right, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And just how many hundreds of these they were gonna sell, and so yeah, I come from like wanting something special that's unique, that's made for me, you know, and like I've had really good stuff when I was young. I had great boards that I pulled right off the rack, and then I had super crap boards too. And it was like
Hmm.
it's kind of hit or miss with that. Now it's less hit or miss. You're pretty much getting 80% of the time you're going to get exactly the same thing that you would get walking into any shop because it's that's something that helps out competitors because competitors are like really, really minute. I mean, they can have 3 of the same board finished off the computer in the same dimensions by the same shaper, and just like half a different stroke or having the sander pass over there, move the edges or anything like that. It can change the same exact product that much if you're that sensitive at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
That's someone who needs that kind of consistency because they're breaking boards, going through 10 boards a year. But someone who's a normal surfer, like even a high level surfer, they don't need that kind of pop out consistency. And it's something that, like, with the price of a lot of boards, like, you kind of deserve to have your freaking name signed on it, you know? Or you don't go and like get a tuxedo made and it's like the same tuxedo as 500 other dudes with your build, but they charge you a whole bunch of money for it as a custom suit. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
it's pretty much
Yeah.
like, I had a buddy yesterday telling me like, I paid $2,500 for this like custom longboard that was supposedly shaped for me, and it didn't even have a freaking signature on it. I was like, "Are
That
you
happened to my friend too.
like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." I'm like,
Yep. Yep. That
and,
happened to
and I'm
people we
like,
know too.
at least you can just go and have them freaking write it on there with a Sharpie or a freaking Posca pen. Like, you deserve to have it signed to you if you're gonna order it as a custom board. And so, yeah, it's crazy. Like, in back in the day, it was cool to have something special that other people can't get their hands on. And now people have kind of lost that, like, unfortunately. And there's people that are still making amazing handcrafted stuff that's not using a computer, or people who do 100% hand shapes that are available, and people still will just choose to, like, I mean, like, if it's an urgency, I want a freaking board now and I want this shape, like, go in the shop and grab it. But like, if you're literally going to order something for yourself, it's not what you can grab out of a shop, then it should actually be like a real interactive custom experience, you know, like.
Yeah, and I think like what's interesting is that the cost difference is not much, actually. Like when
It's
people talk about cost, I feel like there used to be a little bit of a difference where like, okay, you're getting a pop out. Like when I started surfing, which was only 7 years ago, it was like there was a huge value put on a hand shape board. And it was like if you were and I should have been riding a pop out, right? Because had just started and I didn't know what anything meant. But all my friends were so good that they were like, you can't ride a pop out. Like you have to get, even if it's a used hand shaped board, it needs to be like there was this really intense value on the hand shaped boards. And I moved and then kind of saw this different switch of, the shop I was in, the hand shaped boards were really only 200 or 300 bucks more than the pop out style machine boards, and yeah, it's interesting.
the other thing is like, with me, I like making things that mix certain things that I already make, but like, due to according to like what the customer's needing or where they're going to use it, and be
Mm-hmm.
like, or if there's a certain point that they've been struggling on and gone through 3 or 4 boards and they just can't get better at this or that, and like having that discussion and translating it into data, and like making them something that they can't get. Like, you could not go to a rack, you could not go off the rack or look on the web anywhere and get this mixture of different elements that's made for you. Like, that should be a freaking custom, like, not only like, oh, this is gonna float you, oh, you ride small waves, okay, so like this model is good for you in this size, but like, no, like, you need assistance with this, or you're using it in this place with really shitty waves or this kind of condition. Like, if the shaper really knows, like if they've used their own stuff, then they can come up with something that will like literally change a person's surfing in like a board, where you're like, I rode this I rode this board for 2 years, never got better, and I get this brand new board that's, if it's properly designed for them and made for them, like it can change their surfing in a day. It's like they'll be like, holy shit, like why have I been like fighting uphill for 3 years, and all of a sudden like the skies opened. And that was what happened with me, like with certain designs. It was like, yeah, this is pretty good, this is okay, and like I'm picky too, but like all of a sudden I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna roll the dice, I'm gonna go with something really crazy, and I'd be like, holy shit, like this is what I'm doing from now on. I'm not going back. I discovered something nuts. And like I think surfers can also have that. Like it takes, if they're gonna buy a board off the rack, it takes a really knowledgeable staff, which unfortunately there's not much of. And usually, like when I was a kid, although I had like a lot of assistance and a lot of things kind of gifted to me from different companies, I wasn't gonna sell a customer what I rode just to help out my sponsors. It was like, I don't even ride this, but this is what you need. And like it doesn't benefit me in the least to recommend you to this or this. This would stoke out my sponsor, but this is better for you. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of sales staff like that in the shops anymore. And it's that helps out a lot. It's like there's a lot of people in the middle area where they can surf, but they don't know how to kind of move it into the next level, or they've kind of hit a plateau. And that takes like assistance of someone telling them what they should be using, or telling them what's going to help kind of right their problem or move them ahead from what they were using before. And
Do you think
that's
it's oversaturation? Maybe like there's so many surf shops that the competition's so high that they can't have like a staff that is specifically trained to do a certain thing.
I don't know if it's from that, or it's gotten so simple because customers have gotten just so easy to please, to where they're like, oh, I saw it in a magazine, this looks like the raddest board ever. This is my weight. Like at least they should know what kind of like what width, thickness, and length that they need for that person's body build, and even more like matched up to their ability. But I don't think they really have those conversations. I think the customers just go in. Even worse now that we've got YouTube, and like you've got people that are like absorbing information that they haven't experienced through their own body, and they go into the
Yeah.
shop thinking they know everything that they need to know. So there's also it could be like blamed on them that they're not even giving a chance for the staff to even like help them.
Yeah, that's
But
true too. I had a guy come in who had just exactly like that YouTube and was sure that he needed a 7S carbon fiber, like I don't know, 6.2 or something. And it was when the FCS came out with the FCS2s, those fins that like pop in, you don't need a key.
yeah,
And so that was like super rad. It was the first board we had in, and he had never surfed before, wasn't going to take a lesson, wasn't going to whatever, and was just 100% sure that, yep. And you can't change that person's mind.
no, and like shame on him, because like basically he'll keep himself at that same level for months and months and months, when he could have just like gone at it humbly and taken the right advice, and probably jumped right into that board that he wants after a few weeks of biting the bullet and like raising his level to that point.
Yeah.
And that's what I always told people, like, because I coached surfing in Mexico, like during vacations and things like that. And And also at the same time, there was like beginners that are like, nope, I'm ready for this. And when at the surf shop when I was a kid, and I would be like, really? Yeah, I'm like, okay, so like, what's your level? Where do you surf? Um, are you able to come off the bottom and off the top of the wave? Are you breaking a Are you riding a wave that's already broken, or are you taking off before the wave's broken? Like, I'd be like painting a picture of them out in the water in my head, and be like, okay, and now looking at your side, like your weight and stuff, like I said, like I didn't barely go to high school. Like I studied surfboard, so like I'd look at someone and I'd like translate all this information. I'd be like, all right, boom, you need this, and this is why. Like that's the other problem is like I don't think people ask why. Like when they're recommended something, it's like, oh, this is what you need. Okay, like it's like you need to ask why. Like, okay, why do I need that? Like, give me a cool, valid explanation, and I'll take your advice. But like, I don't think people do that enough. And so, be like, I want people to kind of dig in and see if you're actually as knowledgeable as you sound. And do you have a valid explanation for what you're pushing on me? Because like I don't want to hear the same thing that the freaking YouTube commercial told everybody about that model that the company put out, and then have it regurgitated through some like shop staff. Like everybody knows that part of it. Like I don't need anybody to tell me that. I saw the commercial 3 times when I was drooling over this board, and that's why I came in here and to buy it. But like, can you tell me something that's better, or tell me why I shouldn't buy it and why I should buy something better? Like that would make people so much better at surfing. But like it's so funny. Like I think people have just gotten like too soft. I think everybody's just I'll take whatever you're selling me, and jumping on the bandwagon with everybody else is like the most dangerous thing ever. Because
If you could make a list of like, I don't know, 3 to 5 questions of somebody when they're going in to buy a board, what would you say those questions should be that you should ask?
um
Like any board, even for a custom board, like.
right now, what I ask when people that I've never worked with come in and ask me to make them a custom board, um, what's kind of cool is like here in Japan, the surf scene is like the main market is like 30 to 50-year olds. Like it's not like really young. So
Okay.
you got older dudes that have passed like being cocky, knowing what they're like. These guys will actually go like, all right, I want to surf better, and like, can you help make me something that is gonna help these problems? And I'll be like, okay, so what are you riding now? Like, what style of board? What size? How much do you weigh? And how often do you surf? And where do you surf? So like, that's more than 3 questions, but like,
But yeah.
like I need to know how you float on your board. Um, and the next thing would be like people won't always be truthful, but like you can kind of get your way around it of it being like, okay, so like what kind of maneuvers, like how far are you into maneuvers? Like, and here they call like um off the bottom, off the top, they call it ups and downs in
Oh,
like Japanese slang. So you're like, okay, can you do ups and downs? And they're like, oh yeah, for sure. Okay, can you do cutbacks? I can do a little bit of a turn. You're like, okay, so like that's starting to paint a different picture for sure. And then you have other people that are like really explicative about, yeah, I can do cutbacks. I go off the bottom. Um, I surf here. The other thing is how long have you been surfing? It's huge. Unfortunately, there's people that have been surfing 10 years on the same kind of board and it will never get better because they didn't change equipment. But like for the most part, it's like you hear guys, I've been surfing for 15 years. You're like, okay, you can probably surf and you know the ocean, you know your way around, and now it's just basically designing around your body size, and age has a little bit to do with it. It's like You know that like a 20-year-old's not going to be as like quick and light on his feet as a 40-year, and a 40-year-old's not going to be as quick and light on his feet as a 20-year-old. So they're going to need a little bit more help, like with width or thickness, something that helps move the board along by itself without having to do anything. And yeah, it's like you know how active someone is. If they surf a place that you know is a super super flat wave, you're not going to give them something that's made for barrels and something that's made for punchy surf. And the same thing, like if they ride someplace that's heavy and powerful, you're not going to try and push them on like a grovel or a small waveboard. And so it's like, um, I'm getting like sort of off the question a little bit, but like
No, but still, it's
there's like the basic thing would be like, okay, what have you been riding until now? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And they'll usually have a picture of like, oh, well, I was interested in this kind of thing. And if they're cool and like have some plasticity, they'll be like, is this the right idea? Should I be going for this? Or am I just crazy that this is like kind of out of my league? Or is this going to be bad for me or is this going to be good for me? And the people that let you give them some logic of why they would do better with something like that, or how about we kind of steer you in this direction, you'll be able to get here later, but for now, like you don't want to make that road to where you this dream board that you want to ride longer. And so like people really, it's hard to be humble, and you don't want to be susceptible to being embarrassed by like stating how bad you are maybe.
yeah, ego, right?
But the problem is like that's what's going to help you is being humble and having the humility to be honest with where you're at. Like I see tons of guys here. We're in Japan. Like the waves are junk most of the time unless there's a typhoon. And you're like when all the brands call a board a groveler, which is like for the smaller waves. That's like a groveler in Australia. That's a groveler in California. In Japan, like every day is groveling. So like a groveler for Japan is like a mega groveler, like extra. It has to be a whole different species. But like I'll have guys out that they could have been surfing for 20 years, but they're so rigid on riding what they see the pros riding, and they're so far from it, and the board's actually keeping them being from far from it. But they get sold on these boards that they see being ridden in perfect waves around the world, and then they buy them for themselves here in Japan, which is a wave that's like has no comparability, and they think they're going to be able to surf like that. And you see them out like not enjoying surfing. It's a bummer. Like you see them
Yeah.
working so hard and like getting frustrated that they can't catch waves. You're like, it's not made for here. Like, what are you doing? And you're not that level. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break this to you, but you're 40 years old. You've been surfing for 5 years, and you're not John Florence. It's like that's just don't try and ride the same stuff. You're kidding yourself. And people do that. Like, it's like you could be riding that in a couple years if you gradually took the steps. And the other thing is like by losing the fun and working too hard, you're going backwards. Like if you're working too hard and surfing's not fun every time that you go, you're losing confidence. You're not you're gaining experience but losing confidence, and you're gaining experience of not liking surfing too at the same time. And that's gonna like, dude, over a couple years of just fighting uphill, you're gonna start hating surfing. It's like you'll buy every board in the whole shop, and it's not gonna do any difference. It's like unless you get what's right for yourself and have the humility to know where your level is, then could be like a long trip uphill, like, and just distancing yourself from that goal of riding a pro competition board or whatever it is. But that's the only benefit that I think that's been happening with the whole fish thing is fishes aren't great for every wave. And a lot of the promotion that they do on fishes is on long point breaks, like where you're just staying on one fin most of the time until you turn. But the huge benefit of it is compared to a normal shortboard, you're dealing with low rock or a lot of meat and a lot of foam in the front, something that's rounder, thicker. So up where you're paddling, you're going to get into waves that you've never gotten into. And so I think that's what most of the people love about it. The maneuvering part is a little bit different because your stance is different. You're more forward up on the board and things like that. But I think for the average level surfer, that kind of stuff isn't a big deal because you're not really going vertical on the face. You're not doing carves in these tight parts of the face. So just cruising and being able to maneuver easily is a lot of fun and easy to do and probably a little bit more adaptable to like the everyday conditions. So that's the huge benefit that I've seen from that. Even if it's not right for everybody, it's probably adding like a more fun factor, which I like to see. Like I hate to see people just like battling and trying to catch waves and not catch waves and just smacking the water.
Yeah, yeah.
So the whole, like as you were saying, the whole fun board thing, like all of this stuff, like anything that feeds to like the enjoyment and like a brighter vibe in the water is huge for
Yeah.
me. I want to see I
Yeah.
want to see people smiling, having fun, and like enjoying being out there and having like the feeling of abundance rather than like
Yeah.
scarcity, right? Like not having to see everyone out in the water as like a competition for your waves, but being like, yeah, I'm catching waves with no worries. Like, here, you take this one. Like, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
And
I think it
that's what,
just kind of
yeah,
softens the mood a little bit because it's like, how serious can you be? I'm riding a fucking foamy. Like,
exactly. Yeah, and it's like you're probably able to take off on waves that they aren't, and so it's like, yeah, I just like I'd way rather see people playing out in the water than like trying to be a serious competitor outside of a competition. And it's like you don't even surf contest. Why are you trying to be a competitor out here? And don't try and look like one by trying to ride the wrong board and then getting angry because of the bad decision that you made. So like it's funny, man. So crazy.
so is it like that in Japan? Is it like where you're surfing, is it competitive there or what's the vibe like?
It depends on which beach you're at, but gradually it's gotten more and more crowded. Part of it is um like generally by nature, Japanese people they're bred competitive. Like from the elementary schools, they've got sports festivals that they're training for, and it's like you totally give your all, which is like totally commendable. It's rad, but like it also pushes it to the other side of where everything, even the things that you're supposed to enjoy and just play around with, become competitive too. So you get a little bit of that in the water with like kind of the wrong crowd that get into surfing, but um, most of it is just there's too many people in the water, and then it becomes like a battle. Like everyone's there's not enough waves for everybody, so
Hmm.
then it kind of has to become that kind of competitive vibe. But it's a huge island. I mean, there's coasts on both sides. There's tons of places. There's islands in the south, and so like this is basically like only the crowded spots that are close and accessible from the city. But like this morning, for instance, like I surfed this spot that's a reef, and it's kind of a local point, but the people that surf there are like in their 30s to 60s, and everyone surfs really well, mostly longboarders. But it was the closest to like the old California vibe that I'm used to, where people talk to each other in the water, you make new friends and share waves and hoot when you see someone else get a good wave and not only worry about like your own waves. And it was so refreshing. But like there's beaches that are exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was like, damn, you know what? Like I should have been coming here the whole time. Like this is a spot that I have like not given enough attention. And so like yeah, I'm so like surf satisfied today. It's crazy.
That's awesome. That's a perfect day to do a podcast then.
So I was thinking, I was like, dude, like, I went with my girlfriend down there and like she rides a longboard. At first she wasn't getting many waves. I'm like, freaking move into the crowd here. And then the people in the crowd were being super friendly. Finally, she started like linking into some and yeah, it was like everyone got a bunch of waves, everyone had a ton of fun. And I made like three or four new friends, and then I saw like 10 people that I haven't seen that I've probably known for like over 10 years. And I saw like probably 5 to 10 people that I haven't seen in over a couple years, all at the spot. And it was like,
Awesome.
I was kind of like, man, I'm kind of just showing up with my girl at this spot and just kind of, I hope they don't like freak out because I'm generally from the other side, Chiba, where the Olympics are going to be, and
Hmm.
I'm over in Shonan, which is the other side of the Tokyo Bay. But between the two beaches, because Chiba's become the Olympics beach, it's also become the more competitive side, which is crazy. It's just like the Olympics are coming now. It's a sport. We got to get out here. Like we got to be pro. And today was the exact opposite vibe. But I was kind of like, normally it's kind of like, oh, you're from Chiba. What are you doing over here? Oh, you're from Shonan. Why are you coming over here? Kind of thing. Like, not aggressively, but kind of like,
Yeah.
eh. And it was like, oh, dude, what are you doing? How you been? Yeah, right on. I'm like, oh, cool, man. I was just like, within three waves, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna just right at home here. This is like, I love this. And I rode every kind of wave equipment. I brought body surfing equipment, rode my friend's longboard, and then I brought a fish, and then my normal little like mini 410. And within 3 hours, I don't think I've ever ridden like four waves on one board, come in, switch to something else, and then switch to something else. And then I came with extra boards, so I started passing my boards to other people in the lineup. And I had this 5.2 twin fin that works so good. And I had left it at my friend's place as a demo, and it was too small. Nobody ever even used it. So I took it back, and today was the second time I've ridden it, and everyone was freaking. Like I had like 4 or 5 people like surfing pretty well on mediocre surf on it today. I was just like, right on. I'm gonna come down here and just bring my toys, and I'm gonna get like tons of orders.
That's
Like
sick.
that's my new strategy.
It's a good marketing strategy.
Yeah. And the other thing is like you have a lot of shapers that are offering all these different models of boards, and they've got their story about each one. Like it's good for this, but you don't often get to see video of those shapers actually riding them,
That's true.
which is huge. And it's like back in the day, like if you were a shaper, you were probably a professional surfer that's trying to get the edge up on everybody else. This is like from the 60s through the 80s, basically. And then all of a sudden, you've got these people who like you have no idea how well they surf because you'll never see it on video, and unless they surf your home break, you're like, can that person even surf? Who's telling me what I need to ride? Like, and then how can I believe that you know that this board does this if I don't see some video of you riding it, you know? And so that's like that's one thing that people don't like get kind of aggressive enough about. It's kind of
Yeah.
like I there's certain shapers that I'm like come up with like really oddball stuff, which I love. But at the same time, I'll be like, I think it's a little too oddball in this aspect or whatever. And then I'll go on YouTube and I'll look for so-and-so surfing. I'll put in like the search words and you'll get nothing of it. And like you'll get videos of like a commercial of the guy like walking to the beach holding the board and then never seeing him ride it. And you're like, I'm not so sold on that, you know? It's like you gotta prove that shit to me. Like I don't want to hear anything like out of the basic theory of what everybody knows about those kind of designs. Don't tell me that's like something new and different, or it's going to give it an edge, and not be able to prove it yourself. Is I think like I must be getting old. I think I'm getting old. Getting like old and grumpy, like the old people, like when I was like a kid. But like that's the kind of shit people used to need to be real. You know, it sucks. Like. You used to have to prove yourself, and now you can just kind of put on a show in social media and like you can dazzle yourself up, you know, and it's I don't know. Like if you're really trying to sell something, you know, like Daniel Thompson is an amazing example. Like I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but he's designing some of Slater's boards, and he made the weird square looking boards back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Amazing surfer and super knowledgeable about design, and he would come up with some crazy looking shit and people would be like, what the hell is that? And you'd see videos of him surfing so well on it, like as well as his riders, and you're like, all right, dude, like who's gonna say anything about that? Because it's like the proof's in the pudding. But unfortunately, like these days, I think there's really only a handful. There's like people like Matt Biolos from Lost. He was a competitor. He's gotten older, bigger. He still completely rips, and he knows what he's talking about, and he knows how to make designs even with his current age and body style, whatever. He can still make himself rip, and like that says huge things, you know. And if it's someone who surfs really, really well and they can still make themselves surf really well, then they know what they're talking about. And like, if they surf better than the customer that's asking for a board, then the customer should be listening, you know? And
yeah, yep.
And it's pretty funny. Like, you see, like, if this is going to be the best board, then why can't the shaper make himself surf amazing? You know, it's like that's should be something that should be really pressed on people, I think. And
it's something that I never would even think to check in a way. Like I would never think to, but I'm a very average surfer, you know, so I would never, I think I haven't seen it from that angle until you put that out there, just because it's kind of like, who am I to question the authority of a person that's like making these boards? If I'm like, I don't know, I think you kind of assume that I'm here level wise. And so I'm coming to someone that's up here level wise.
But that's in your own mind. Like if you're on the water, you might even surf better than the freaking shaper. You have no proof of them out there being able to surf.
It's true.
Then you might have the upper hand. So that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good angle.
Come for a surf with me, you know, like that. I think like right now, like especially like any shaper who's not pounding out orders, it's not like in the top 10 of the makers. Like if you believe in your designs and you have the time to take like pay attention to customer for customer, then you should definitely like agree to go surfing with them. And like, and a lot of people, if they're not what they say they are, will avoid going surfing with their customers probably. And like that's at that sheet that like if I was a customer, I'd be like, all right, so like what do you got going this weekend? Let's go for a surf. Like I'm about to spend on longboards. They're like $2,500 sometimes for a freaking custom lawnmower. Like I'm about to basically pay 3 times my rent to you. So like the least you can do is come see me surf and make sure that I'm ordering the right board. And if they're out there floundering, you're like, let's cancel that order. If you can't help yourself, then you're definitely not going to help me. So, but yeah, people need to look at things different. I think it's just like everything's too force fed easily through YouTube and social media.
Yeah, I just think also too, it's like it can be hard to know in a way. Like it's hard to know that unless you are in a place like Southern California or maybe Hawaii or a place where there's an abundance of shapers. You are seeing your local shaper out there ripping. Where for us and this podcast, a lot of our listeners, there's no shop even anywhere near them. So they're assuming that when they're going to a shop, that the level of knowledge is at a certain point. So to not even to know that now is extremely beneficial, and I think other people that hear this will also think it's really beneficial. Like, yeah, if I'm driving, yeah, you're right. If I'm driving 4 hours to check out a whatever board, then we should go and have a surf together or whatever.
You need to question it for sure. And then the other thing is like you really have so much access to knowledge. Like there's some really good board review things, some really kind of in-depth tutorials about like the design and stuff. I've seen a lot of really cool stuff lately that's even as a shaper, I'm like, wow, they've got it spot on, and it's not just someone like spewing out stuff that they don't know. There's a recent one that I came across called Surf Simply, which you guys should check. And this guy, I can't think of his name, but really impressive, super knowledgeable, super cool, and it's not like a know-it-all kind of approach, but he tells you really in digestible terms about different maneuvers, what this means on a board, what's the difference between this and this, and I think he answers a lot of viewer questions. There's I'm trying to think of the name of the. There's another one where there's a lot of so many different board tests where they actually talk through the design of the boards and stuff now. So you've got all this access to really get knowledgeable, like for all the people that you're talking about. Like when you get to the shop, you should already give yourself some base knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can actually almost play with the staff to see if they're smart enough to really like know what you know as well. Like you can pretend to be dumber than you are, and then when you hear them spew out some stuff that's bullshit, you're like, yeah, like can I talk to one of the other staff? Like but yeah, I think at this time that's one huge benefit, like as you say, like the people who can't go personally and talk to the shapers, or they have to travel a long ways to the shop. Before wasting your time, like take some time. Like if you're serious about trying to get better, or you're serious about going and spending a bunch of money on a brand new whatever, then it's worth your time to trade in like scanning through the timeline of Instagram to go actually like go and listen to some valuable input that will just make you more knowledgeable, and it might even help you understand the board that you already have a little bit better. You'd be like, man, I don't even need a new board. You're like, I'm looking at things wrong, or the fins. I've been trying to use the wrong size fins because my body's too big and I'm reusing small fins, or like really simple stuff. There's like weird stuff that you can kind of go and tune up and fix these kind of bad habits or something that's been kind of like stumping you, just by knowing how a board works, or having certain maneuvers explained to you in easy terms that you can understand, and just flip your viewpoint around a little bit, and like, you know what, I've been looking at this all wrong, and all of a sudden it just seems so much easier. There's tons of knowledge out there to be like soaked up, and so like that's for your viewers. That's like,
Yeah, no, that's super rad. That's super rad. I mean, it's all like, I mean, you learn something new every day, right? But that's it's kind of like it's empowering kind of thing. Like the way that you said that, like you don't know actually how good does your shaper surf, and that just kind of like, got a little introspective there, like, huh, how about that? I never really thought about that. So that's just super wild. So, well, I've got three last questions for you because we're at 2 hours now. This is
I
sick.
know, the thing here, and yeah, my girlfriend's sitting on the other side of the computer. She's cool as heck, but I'm like, yeah, I think it's gonna be like an hour or something.
Sometimes it just happens like this. It's sick. I mean, it works for me. But so I have three final questions. The first question is, what is the weirdest wave that you've ever surfed?
Uh, okay, there's a lot, but it was funny because I was just explaining this to my girlfriend yesterday because she was we were looking on Google, and she goes, "Oh, there's Alaska. You've been to Alaska, right?" And so this crazy thing that happened was there was a show on ESPN2 that was a fishing show, and like, I'm not a fisherman. Like, to anyone who likes fishing, like, it's darn cool, but I never was into it before this happened. And so I'm at a surf contest in Encinitas, California, this place called Moonlight Beach. And I think it was like a benefit charity contest or something. But one of my team riders was in the contest. So I just went to go and hang out and support him. And I see these two dudes with these giant ESPN2 cameras in khaki outfits. They're just so out of place at a surf contest. And they had a fishing show, which was like a reality show, where they pick random people and give them a free trip to wherever for some crazy fishing trip. And so, yeah. And so they had like, I think they talked to two different people, and their rule was you had 2 minutes, oh no, 5 minutes and two phone calls to get your time off of work, um, see if your family would let you go or things like that. And so that was the whole game show thing of it. And so they asked two people who couldn't go because of their family, and another guy worked for like an opposing television station. So they both got denied. And so these guys are walking in like, I don't know, I think I caught their eye somehow. It's like, say, I said hi or something, and I was like, "Hey, yeah, what are you guys doing?" or something. And they came right up to me and they go, "Hey, do you want to go to? What do you think about going to Alaska to fish king salmon and see brown bears?" And I was like, "I'm like, yeah, that's rad." They're like, "Okay, you have 5 minutes and two phone calls to get the time off of work or whatever." And I go, I work for myself, so like, yeah, let's just go. It's the first time in the history of the show that no one needed to make a phone call, I think. So they took me to this place called Elfin Cove, Alaska, for a fishing trip. It's like a $10,000 trip where you fly in on a seaplane and stuff. And so we're on the boat, and I'm like, wow, this boat makes a killer wake. I was looking at the boat wave off the bat because I do wake surfing. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, yeah, we surf behind boats in lakes in California and all over the place. And they were like, "I don't know what you're talking about." They're like, "During this trip, if we find you a surfboard, will you ride behind the boat?" And I'm like, "For sure I will." And so this is all on YouTube. It's funny if you look up "wanna go fishing." It's Ben Way and "wanna go fishing." So, anyways, we found one surfboard in the whole village. And the day that they were ready to shoot, they got me like a double 5 millimeter wetsuit, something crazy, and gloves and boots. But the dude who owned the surfboard was out on a fishing trip, and we couldn't get the surfboard. So I made a board out of a fishing, an igloo cooler lid. Like
Oh my God.
they had like trash cooler lids in their workshop and all this stuff. And I epoxied some like fishing bobber things to make fins in it. And I rode the boat wake behind the fishing boat in, I think it's Juneau, Alaska, called Elfin Cove. But what was gnarly is like 2 minutes outside. This is like from the boat dock outside of our lodge. But 2 minutes outside of that is where we saw like we were looking at killer whales and sea lions and all this crazy shit. So like I was trying so hard not to fall off, and when I did, I was like, "Come on, boat, like circle around." But I was able to let go of the rope and get waves on a cooler lid. So that was the craziest wave that I've ever ridden.
That is a pretty epically weird wave. That's sick.
I tried to give you a short version of it.
That's good. That's awesome. I'll link like when we post this, I'll find the YouTube video and I'll link that YouTube video and this YouTube video. That way people can see it.
It's freaking funny.
My next question is, what is your biggest oh shit moment while surfing?
Biggest oh shit moment. There was two, but the biggest one, two that were both in Mexico. Like Mexico, if you live in San Diego, you go to Mexico and like you can be at one of the surf spots within an hour. Like it's that close. And 2.5 hours down from San Diego, there's a city called Ensenada, and there's a world-class point break called San Miguel. It's all rocks, like no sand, just rocks with this beautiful right. And I love the waves so much that I rented like a little like kind of like a camping trailer with a patio right in front of the point. And I'd go back and forth from Oceanside like once a week. But I was out there one day when it was like super flat, and I'd be able to surf during the week. Like during the weekend, people come down from San Diego everywhere, but during the week, there's no one. And so I was in the middle of the week by myself out there, and it's like windy and small and waiting forever for waves. And my girlfriend at the time was on the beach, like sitting on top of the rocks. But finally, I sat there for like 15 minutes waiting for a set. I turned around to start taking off, and there was a gigantic sea lion, like the big kind, like the big head one, like this kind, not a seal. And the thing basically popped up in the line that I was about to take off in. I probably about a longboard's distance away, and it rose up out of the water like all like flexing on me basically. And I was like, oh my God, dude, that thing is freaking huge. But like, I'm like scared as heck. And she's like, my girlfriend is screaming on the beach, like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, I see the freaking thing. Like, don't help me out here. And then the thing went underwater. And when it went underwater, I was like, oh my God, dude, this thing is like going to come up and freaking chomp me. So, luckily, the wave doesn't break far out from the rocks, and I just like I bombed for where my fins were almost dragging on the rocks. Because in the water, the thing would be way faster than me, but as soon as I got on the rocks, the thing would be like trying to keep up. And so, like, the thing disappeared, charged it to the rocks, got up, and then like I was like, where did the freaking thing go? And then, by then, it was like 2 peaks down, swimming away, but in the winter, there's north wind, and the north wind was blowing the gnarliest, stinky stench from that thing. Like they smell like a garbage can full of old fish. Like,
Ugh.
they're gnarly. And like I talked to different friends and stuff who were like a marine biologist, and they were like, those things have bacterias. If they bite you, they have bacterias in their mouth that people can't even find a cure for. Like, they're like biohazard. And so like that was my biggest oh shit moment. So
yeah, that's so wild. I was definitely expecting shark, not sea lion.
No, luckily, man, like I've been really, really lucky with very few encounters.
That's good.
Yeah.
My last question is, what is next for you?
Um, so yeah, what is next? I think we discussed it earlier, but like
Yeah.
next is like bringing my boards back to availability to everyone and reapproaching what I was doing a little while back in a better way, a little more professional way. So yeah, hopefully people will start seeing these crazy little small wave boards a little bit more often and more frequently in different places because I've kind of had them locked down in Japan for about 10 years. And I think
Awesome.
you guys need one for Florida for sure because
100%. You let me know when we can get our hands on one and we'll definitely take one. I was thinking too, like, because we came from the lakes,
yeah,
surfing like Lake Michigan, they would be just perfect out there. Because once you start to progress a little bit on the lake, the wave is so fast that you need the beef, but you also need like you want like a little bit of a performancey like looser vibe. Like even a beefier performance board on the lake, even if it's like it is doable, like the wave itself is so fast that it's
but
kind of like
this is not a river. It's not a river wave.
no, it's a lake wave. I can send you some videos. Lake Michigan was where we were surfing, but like Lake Superior, all those there's like a whole surf culture there. And I feel like those boards would be totally like absolutely sick for there.
If you send me some video, like I'll design a board for that place for sure. Like
Yeah, that would be awesome. That's like how we started the podcast actually. Was talking to lake surfers.
super cool.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, thank you so much for doing this. This was awesome.
Thanks to whoever's watching this. I hope it helped out and didn't like freaking bore them.
And that was episode 56. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I will link below Ben's episode of the ESPN show. So you want to go fishing. It's totally hilarious. I'll also link below Ben's details so that you can get in contact with him about boards, about the cruisers that he's making. They're super cool. And of course, we'll see you next week with another episode.